Truistery Vibes warmly welcomes all our beloved listeners. We're so glad to see you again in our familiar time slot.
Today,
Truistery Vibes brings you a brand new story, one that we hope will touch your heart and stay with you. As you listen, feel free to leave a comment sharing the quote or moment that left the deepest impression on you. Wishing you a wonderful and meaningful listening experience. Ember Sterling eased her white Ford Bronco along the winding cedar-shingled driveway of her Cascade Ridge home. Fingers curled protectively over the gentle swell of her belly as 28 weeks of pregnancy carried her through the late afternoon haze. Normally, at this hour, the pines would shimmer in golden light under a sky streaked with pink, while the magnolia blossoms lining the path lent a soft fragrance to the mountain air. A promise of summer still to come, yet today Ember felt only a hollow ache where excitement ought to be. She glanced down at the maternity wish card Wilder had sent earlier that morning, turquoise cardstock embossed with delicate silver script, and recalled his surprise gift of custom gift certificates. 4 handmade maternity gowns and a small tin of turmeric honey tea to soothe her midnight queasiness. In happier moments, his thoughtfulness made her heart swell. But since he'd boarded that red-eye flight to San Francisco 4 nights ago under the pretext of a sudden client emergency, his messages had been curt and functional. In back-to-back meetings, "Will call when I can, love you," and any warmth seemed squeezed out by boardroom demands and corporate deadlines. Sliding to a stop beside the ivy-clad porch, Ember hesitated before turning off the ignition, her pulse still racing from the text that had lit up her phone mere moments ago, an unfamiliar area code, a terse message reading, "Is this Ember Sterling? Marlo Vance recommended I reach out urgent." Ember had sent a cautious reply, "Who is this?" And a second notification had arrived immediately, "Better call me ASAP. It cannot wait." The door clicked open with a soft groan as she rose and stepped onto the porch, the breeze tugging at her hair, carrying the faint scent of wild roses growing against the fence. She pressed the green call button on the screen, closing her eyes against the quiver in her chest. Moments later, a man's voice came through, calm and measured. "Miss Sterling? This is Carter Hayes. I work with your husband in San Francisco. I'm not related to him, just a colleague, but I wanted you to hear this directly. I saw Wilder last night at the Redwood Lane Inn with another woman." Ember's breath caught in her throat, her gaze shifting to the darkened windows of the living room behind her where her footage streaming laptop Saturday he wouldn't. She choked out, voice trembling. "I've forwarded you secure access to the inn's surveillance footage," Carter continued. "I thought you'd want to see it yourself." With shaking fingers, Ember swiped her thumb across the screen to open her email and tapped the link. The grainy infrared images appeared, a shadowed lobby framed by polished wood and antique lanterns. Wilder's tall silhouette stepping inside, coat draped over one shoulder, his posture relaxed as he drew a woman close, her laughter rippling through the static audio. Ember watched again as they moved past the reception desk, heads bent together, a private world spinning around them, and the scene replayed until she could no longer bear to see it. Tears blurred her vision, and she pressed her hand to her mouth, stifling a sob as memories she'd sealed away flooded back. Their first date at the quaint pastel-pink cafe on Maple Drive where Wilder's shy grin had made her heart soar. The magical hush of Christmas Eve in the town square, when he dropped to one knee beneath falling snow and slipped a ring onto her finger. The soft strength of his hands massaging her back through long nights of morning sickness, while she lay curled beneath flannel sheets. She remembered how safe she had once felt, how every whisper of his voice had been carved into her soul, and now she realized that even those perfect recollections were tinged with doubt. Earlier that afternoon, she'd sat across from Marlo Vance at the Blue Marigold Bistro, an ivy-draped cafe perched on the edge of town. Its oversized windows catching drifting shafts of sunlight that danced on polished oak tables, where Marlo, at 30 the embodiment of fearless independence, had stirred her lavender latte with deliberate slowness before leaning in and saying, You have to admit it. Wilder's been distant, always traveling, always busy. You deserve someone who shows up for you, not just sends pretty cards." Ember had laughed it off, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. He's just under pressure, you know that. Love and work don't always sync. Yet Marlowe's frown had held a piercing edge. Trust me, I've seen it before. Good men can turn cold when temptation drifts in. I'd hate to see you blindsided. Ember had forced a smile, thanking her friend for lunch, driving home confident that her marriage was built on solid ground. But confidence had dissolved with the evening light, and now, on her porch beneath the whispering pines, Ember felt the foundation crack. She forced herself to breathe evenly as she closed the email window and reached for her phone again, dialing Wilder's number despite every rational part of her insisting she should not. The line rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. Hey, it's Wilder. Can't talk now, call me tomorrow. She placed a hand over her heart as her world tilted dangerously, pressing her phone against her ear to listen to that clipped message once more. Then she set it on silent and stepped inside, the door shutting out the cool night air. The living room lights glowed softly, highlighting the stacks of unread library books and the wedding portrait above the mantel, Wilder's arm around Ember beneath strands of twinkling lights, both of them radiant with joy. Ember's legs trembled as she slid onto the love seat, the cushions conforming around her, comforting and confining at once. She lifted her hands to her face, pressing her palms into her eyes to stem the flood of betrayal. How long had this been going on? How many nights had he spent away while she believed he sat alone in a hotel room, thinking only of her? Now she knew the truth. Those nights had been spent entwined with someone else. A sharp ache pierced her chest as she remembered Marlowe's final words before she left the cafe. If you ever want the truth, you'll have to see it for yourself. Ember's vision blurred as fresh tears coursed down her cheeks. She stood unsteadily, crossed to the coffee table, and picked up a framed photo of her and Wilder in the marshmallow pink cafe, sliding it gently back into place. The image now felt like a relic of another person's life. Swallowing the lump in her throat, she opened the side drawer and retrieved a soft cashmere shawl, wrapping it tightly around her shoulders as if it could shield her from the chill of reality. With deliberate calm, she pressed her phone's call button once more and dialed Marlowe, her voice strained but resolute. We need to talk. Now. Only silence greeted her. Then the line clicked over to another familiar tone. Your door is unlocked. Ember squared her shoulders, smoothing the front of her shawl, and crossed the room to unlatch her front door. As she opened it, the late evening air washed over her in a swirl of pine and moonlight. Marlowe stepped inside, her face pale in the porch light, empathy and something like guilt flickering in her eyes. Ember closed the door behind her, heart pounding, and waited as Marlowe approached. I'm so sorry, Marlowe whispered, voice trembling. Ember pressed a hand to her rounded abdomen and drew in a steady breath, eyes meeting Marlowe's. Show me everything you know, she said, each word carrying the weight of betrayal and the iron will to uncover the truth. Outside, the pines stood sentinel in the deepening dark, their needles whispering secrets Ember was determined to unravel for the sake of her own peace and for the life she carried within her. In the days that followed Wilder's sudden San Francisco departure, his client emergency, Ember Sterling found herself enveloped in a bubble of small, tender gestures that seemed to reaffirm the foundation of their marriage even as doubt flickered at its edges, for each sunrise brought Wilder's voice through her phone with a gentle, "Good morning, my love," and by mid-morning a text would arrive with a screenshot of a freshly brewed pot of her favorite chamomile tea, its steam dancing in the morning light like an unspoken promise that he was thinking of her. Afternoons were punctuated by surprise deliveries, a bouquet of pale peach ranunculus wrapped in recycled craft paper, a soft lavender-scented eye pillow to soothe her growing fatigue, and once, at precisely 3 p.m., a beautifully hand-lettered card arrived, announcing that he had personally scheduled an in-home prenatal massage therapist to arrive at their doorstep later that evening. All of which stirred a warm rush of gratitude that settled like honey in Ember's chest and reminded her of the kindness that had drawn her to Wilder in the first place. One particular Thursday, as the bureau clock chimed 4 times, The doorbell rang and Ember opened the door to a smiling stranger in a crisp uniform carrying a small massage table and an aromatherapy kit. She set up 2-hour windows of candlelit calm in the spare bedroom, where the faint notes of eucalyptus and bergamot drifted through the partially drawn curtains, and Ember lay on her side, supported by pillows that cradled her bump, while the technician whispered gentle assurances and Wilder's recorded voice played softly in the background. "I wish I could be there to hold your hand, but this will have to do until I'm back." The next morning, as the sun cast pale gold stripes across the hardwood floors, Wilder video called her from a sleek corner office overlooking the Bay Bridge, his smile as bright as the sunrise behind him, and guided Ember through a short, doctor-approved prenatal yoga routine. "Raise your arms like we're reaching for those pink clouds." He coached with playful encouragement, his voice steady and reassuring as she worked through every stretch with a care that warmed her spirit. That same afternoon, a package arrived containing a bespoke wooden swing to hang from the porch beams, hand-carved from salvaged cedar by a local artisan Wilder had discovered. Complete with cushions upholstered in soft linen and embroidered with their initials, Ember imagined the two of them rocking side by side on warm evenings, the air perfumed by jasmine vines. The world distilled down to just this moment of quiet anticipation. Each evening, Wilder's dinner plans reached her in advance via a shared digital calendar. On Monday, it was grilled lemon-thyme chicken with steamed asparagus, recipes he'd tested in his studio kitchen and written out in meticulous detail. On Wednesday, it was butternut squash risotto paired with a non-alcoholic sparkling pear mocktail, and on Friday a small feast of roasted wild-caught salmon with dill yogurt drizzle that arrived perfectly warmed, delivered by a courier in a recyclable tote emblazoned with her monogram. When Ember logged off for the night, one final surprise would await her on the bedside table. A Polaroid snapshot of Wilder in his favorite flannel shirt, holding a small chalkboard on which he'd scrawled, "Counting the days until I'm back in your arms." The photo's corners stained with lemon-scented candle wax and the chalk lettering smudged ever so slightly, as though he'd written it in a rush of longing. Over the weekend, Wilder had arranged a socially distanced virtual baby shower with their closest friends and family, coordinating a video conference that sprang to life with balloons and banners in soft pastel hues, each guest holding up small, whimsical gifts, a knitted cap for the baby, a set of wooden rattles, a fragrance-free baby lotion, while Wilder hosted the event with light-hearted warmth, quizzing everyone on embarrassing baby name suggestions and promising a grand in-person celebration once travel restrictions eased. Ember watched the grid of bright, smiling faces with tears of gratitude and pride sparkling in her eyes, heart swelling at the breadth of love and support that spanned time zones. Each thoughtful presentation weaving stronger threads into the tapestry of her anticipation. In the quiet hours before dawn, Ember would wake to a final ping on her phone. A voice memo of Wilder humming a lullaby they'd once danced to in a moonlit kitchen, the soft melody drifting through her speakers like a warm hug, coaxing her back to sleep with the promise that no distance, no doubt, could ever truly dim the light they shared. And so, entwined in these countless small acts of care, each note left on a sticky pad beside her laptop, each gentle reminder to rest and hydrate, each surprise package that arrived as if by magic, Ember allowed herself to believe, if only for a few fleeting hours, that their love was a fortress impervious to any storm, that the threads they'd woven of trust, laughter, and mutual devotion would hold fast until Wilder returned home, where every soft glow of candlelight, every calming breath, every shared smile would once again be theirs to share in person, undimmed by distance or uncertainty. Ember Sterling had always trusted Marlo Vance with her life. They'd met in their first year at Pacific Northwest University, Ember fresh-faced and eager to conquer the world, Marlo bold, fiercely independent, and already several steps ahead in every way. Over the years, they'd celebrated successes, commiserated over heartbreaks, and woven their lives together so tightly that Ember often said Marlo felt like a sister. So when Ember peered out her kitchen window one sun-dappled Saturday and saw Marlo's familiar auburn hair bobbing through the crowd on Main Street, she smiled and grabbed her keys. certain this would be a routine afternoon of retail therapy and lattes at Blue Marigold Bistro. The boutique-in district of Cascade Ridge was a cluster of old-world charm and modern reinvention. Cobblestone sidewalks winding past wrought iron lampposts and storefronts painted in jewel tones, where artisanal chocolatiers shared space with bespoke jewelry designers. At the heart of it sat the Velvet Heart Inn, its weathered wood facade and stained glass windows promising mysteries kept behind closed doors. Ember and Marlowe had often admired its vintage charm, once even dreaming of renting the penthouse suite for a girls' weekend, so it seemed perfectly natural when Ember suggested they duck inside out of a sudden summer drizzle. "Marlowe, over here," Ember called, weaving through the lantern-lit lobby, where the scent of lavender oil mingled with creaking floorboards. Marlowe rose from a corner seat, swirling a cinnamon-spiced cappuccino in her hand. Her eyes, usually so animated, held a cautious edge. "Hey, Ember," she murmured, setting the cup down on an antique brass table. "You look surprised." Ember laughed off the tension, slipping into the seat opposite her friend. "Caught in the rain. But I needed to see you. How are things?" She lifted her phone to show a photo of her burgeoning baby bump, the screen framed by the soft glow of the lobby lamps. 30 weeks today." Marlowe's smile was warm but fleeting. "I know. I got your nursery inspo board. Those blush pink wallpaper samples are gorgeous." She leafed through Ember's mood board on a tablet Ember had handed her, but her thumbs hesitated over the images. Before Ember could comment, Marlowe's phone buzzed with a vibrating hum. She glanced at it, her brow tightening. Ember noticed the lock screen read "Wilder," along with a frosted rose illustration. Marlowe's lips pressed into a thin line. "Duty calls," she said, standing abruptly. "I'm sorry, Wait, where are you going?" Ember asked, startled. Marlowe's gaze flitted to the archway leading toward the guest rooms. "Just have to handle something. Be back in a flash." She forced a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Ember frowned as Marlowe slipped past a potted orchid and disappeared down the hall. The lobby's muted chatter and the gentle creak of a rocking chair by the reception desk suddenly felt charged with quiet urgency. Ember told herself Marlowe must have left her phone behind by mistake, or perhaps she'd simply remembered a chore. Yet the abruptness of her friend's departure sent a shiver up Ember's spine. She rose and offered a polite nod to the innkeeper, an elderly woman arranging fresh rosemary sprigs on the front desk. "Be right back," Ember murmured, stepping into the hallway. The wood floor beneath her loafers was cool and creaked softly with each step, the air scented with cedar and old paper from the library nook tucked around the corner. Ember paused at the first door, labeled Suite 2, but it stood closed and silent. Down the hall, she spotted a narrow staircase leading upward, its wrought iron railing twisting like a vine. Curiosity pulled her forward. She ascended the stairs quietly, little pinpricks of light guiding her path. On the second floor, she found doors numbered 3 through 6, each with brass nameplates. A hush lay thick in the corridor. Ember peered through a frosted window in the door of room 4, where a dim glow illuminated the outline of a plump velvet armchair and a small writing desk. The door, once ajar, was now shut. Ember pressed her hand against the wood, listening. Faintly, she heard Marlowe's voice, low and urgent. "You promised we said no one would know." Ember's heart thundered. No one ever used code around her. She braced her palm against the door and, gently, nudged the edge. The latch clicked open with surprising ease. Inside, the room was bathed in the soft glow of a single bedside lamp, casting long shadows over a plush four-poster bed draped in burgundy silk. The walls, lined with vintage botanical prints, transformed the space into a dreamy nook. And at the far end of the room, in front of a tall, arched window overlooking the tiled roof courtyard, stood Marlowe. Only she wasn't alone. Ember's breath caught as she took in the scene. Marlowe's slender profile, clad in a forest green shift dress that fluttered with her anxious energy, and beside her, a man Ember recognized only by the back of his tailored jacket, broad shoulders, dark hair cropped short, leaning in close as he cradled Marlowe's hand. Ember's fingers tightened on the doorframe, knuckles whitening. The man's voice, rich and smooth, carried unmistakable familiarity. "Marlowe, are you sure?" Marlowe's reply was a whisper, but Ember heard every syllable. "It's the only way." Ember can never find out. A cold knot formed in Ember's stomach. The memory of trusting Marlowe with her deepest secrets, her fears about motherhood, her anxieties over Wilder's distance, felt like a naive folly now. She wanted to step forward, to demand answers, but her feet felt rooted to the spot, her mind whirling with the implications. The man brushed a stray lock of hair from Marlowe's face. Ember recognized the gesture from that secret webcam footage, one she had not yet viewed, but whose echo still haunted her chest. "We'll be fine. It's just for tonight," the man said, kindness lacing his tone. "Then we'll disappear." Marlowe leaned into him, her eyes closed, her expression tender and vulnerable. Ember's heart fractured at the sight. The betrayal cut deeper than any boardroom lie or corporate maneuver. It was intimate, wounding, personal. She should turn and leave, retreat to the safety of her living room, to the technology that had revealed Wilder's infidelity. But her feet dragged her forward, drawn by the need to confront this double betrayal. She took a single, quiet step into the room. At that moment the lamp shivered, and the man and Marlowe both turned, their bodies tensing like spring-wound toys. Ember's presence in the doorway stood like a silent accusation. "Marlowe," Ember's voice trembled, fragile as the glass vase on the bedside table. Marlowe's eyes flew open, her warm hazel orbs wide with shame and panic. The man released her hand and took a half-step back, brow furrowing as he recognized Ember's pregnant silhouette framed by the open doorway.
"Ember."
Marlowe choked out. I. The man's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry," he said to Ember, his voice low. "I didn't know she brought anyone here." Ember pressed her hand to her belly, heart pounding. The tiled courtyard beyond the window, with its trickling fountain and climbing ivy, seemed surreal, as though everything familiar had shifted, rearranged into a world of secrets. Marlowe's lips quivered. She opened her mouth, then closed it, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. The inn's hush felt suffocating, as though every creak in the floor was a fingernail raking across Ember's trust. "Why?"
Ember whispered.
"Why would you do this to me?" Marlowe swallowed, her voice brittle.
"E."
But Ember could barely hear her words over the pounding in her ears. Betrayal seemed to pulse in every beat of her heart. The man took a cautious step forward, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. Ember stared at him, at Marlowe, at the walls lined with delicate prints that now felt like witnesses to deceit. In that suspended moment, Ember realized that Cascade Ridge's pines sheltered more secret histories than she could ever imagine. The whispers she'd once dismissed as small-town rumor had turned into a gale-force truth that threatened to uproot every joyful memory she had shared with the two people she loved most. Marlowe's shoulders slumped as she finally found her voice. "I'm so sorry, Em. I never meant to hurt you. But you have to understand, I had no choice." Ember's breath caught. No choice. The irony knifed through her chest. She, who had believed herself protected by the loyalty of her oldest friend, now stood in an room where every promise felt like a lie. She closed the distance to the foot of the bed, each step a testament to the steadiness she forced into her legs. The man moved toward the door, as if sensing he'd overstayed his welcome. Ember turned to him, eyes blazing with the raw light of betrayal. "Get out," she said, voice trembling but resolute. "Both of you." He paused in the archway, guilt flickering across his features, then bowed his head and slipped quietly away, closing the door behind him with a soft click. Ember turned back to Marlowe, who stood frozen, tears streaming freely.
Ember's chest tightened,
and she drew a measured breath. "Explain," she said, each syllable a sharp demand. "Everything." Marlowe nodded, her arms wrapping around herself. Ember felt the weight of years of friendship pressing in on her. Shared laughter, tears, inside jokes, and in that moment realized some bonds could never be the same again. Outside, the wind stirred the pines, their needles whispering secrets Ember could no longer ignore. As Marlowe began to speak, her voice cracked like old wood. Ember braced herself for a confession she dreaded but desperately needed, because sometimes the truest healing emerged from the fiercest revelations, and tonight, under the watchful glow of the Velvet Heart's stained glass windows, Ember Sterling would discover just how powerful her own heart could be when forced to reckon with betrayal. Ember Sterling lay still on the edge of the love seat, her breath slowing as she watched the steady pulse of streetlights dancing through the sheer curtains. The footage from the Redwood Lane Inn had shattered her trust, but she still didn't know the full story, how long Wilder had been slipping away, what secrets he and Marlowe had shared behind closed doors. Determined to gather evidence before making any accusations, Ember resolved to become her own detective. She spent the next morning crafting a plan. By mid-afternoon, she had ordered a professional-grade mini voice recorder disguised as a sleek black pen, its built-in clip perfect for securing to a lapel or jacket pocket, and had carefully tested its functions in the bathroom mirror. The device boasted a battery life of over 20 hours and a microSD slot for high-capacity storage. The manufacturer's promise of studio-quality audio in any environment sealed the deal for Ember's purposes. That evening, as Wilder prepared for his video call, Ember watched him in the amber glow of the bedside lamp. He was buttoning his navy blazer, the one he wore for client presentations, over a crisp white shirt. Ember slipped the recorder from her robe pocket. With practiced stealth, she clipped it to the inside pocket of Wilder's blazer, tucking it just above where his heart would beat. Wilder never noticed. He leaned in for their goodnight hug, planting a soft kiss on Ember's forehead before retreating to his study upstairs. Ember's pulse raced as she retrieved her laptop from the coffee table and created a new folder labeled Surveillance Recordings. She powered on the recorder with a quiet click and synced it via Bluetooth to her computer, then let the device run through the night, confident it would capture every whispered secret. By dawn, Ember was already seated at the window alcove, mug of chamomile tea in hand, as the first rays of sunlight filtered through the pine needles. She took a shaky sip and opened the folder. A timeline of files stretched across the screen, each named by hour, 06_00_07_00, MP3, 07_00_08_00, MP3, and so on. Ember selected the file for the 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. slot, just after Wilder had said he'd be in a meeting, though in reality, he had claimed to be home that night. The playback control glowed. Ember hit play. At first, the room was filled with the soft hum of Wilder's desktop fan and the click-clack of his mechanical keyboard. She recognized the low drone of his distant conference call, punctuated by polite formalities. Client A distorted over VoIP, and if we can finalize the deliverables by Q3, we can align with the sustainability benchmarks you requested. Wilder, muffled. Understood. Let me draft the updated proposal and send it over before end of day. Ember's heart thudded. That was business as usual. She skimmed ahead to the 9 p.m. file. The night was quieter. Pages turning, the faint clink of ice in a glass, and Wilder's pen on paper. Ember pictured him in his study, jotting notes. She allowed herself a brief flicker of relief. Perhaps her suspicions were unfounded. But she didn't stop there. She scrolled to the 11 p.m. segment. The fan whirred more loudly now, mingled with softly muffled voices that didn't belong in a conference call. She cupped her hand over the laptop speaker to catch every nuance. Woman, soft whisper, are you sure she won't suspect? Wilder, low, urgent, I've covered all my tracks. She thinks I'm in San Francisco. Marlowe set it up. Woman, you promised you'd end it after tonight. Wilder, voice cracking, I know. But I can't let Ember find out now. She's too close. Woman, exasperated close? She's in the next room. She'll hear us. Your heart's practically screaming. Wilder, voice tight with tension. Just breathe. We have 10 minutes. Ember recoiled, her mug slipping from her grasp and clattering to the hardwood floor. She pressed pause, stunned by the cruelty in Wilder's words. The way he casually dismissed her proximity, as though her presence in the house was invisible. A hot tear blurred her vision. She replayed the excerpt 3 times, forcing herself to hear the betrayal in each syllable. Her hands trembled as she hit save as and renamed the file, Infidelity_11 p.m. MP3. Her mind raced with questions. Who was this woman? How long had Wilder been lying? What schemes had Marlowe orchestrated? And worst of all, how could 2 people she loved most be colluding against her? She needed more context. Ember fast-forwarded to midnight. The house was silent, save for the distant crash of waves on the bay, carried faintly by the night breeze. She heard Wilder's pen scraping against paper again, then a soft rustle as if pages were being shuffled. Ember leaned in close, straining to catch details. Wilder, softly to himself, I'm so sorry, Em. I never wanted to hurt you.
Pause.
Wilder, clearing throat, just go back to sleep. Ember's throat tightened. The dissonance between his apology to M and his collusion with another woman minutes earlier left her reeling. Was he talking to himself? Had he recorded a separate confession? Or was that apology meant to play back to Ember at some point? The uncertainty twisted her gut. She skipped ahead to 1 a.m., when she was sure the house lay fully asleep. There was a soft tapping at the window, a branch brushing glass, and then Wilder's deep voice, urgent and hushed. Wilder, meet me on the deck after she's asleep. 10 minutes, that's all I ask. Woman pleading tonight. Wilder? You promised. Wilder, I can't lose you, not now. Woman whispering. Then stay away from her. Ember pressed her hand to her heart. The chilling clarity of his words confirmed her worst fears. Wilder had been leading a double life, courting another woman in the very home Ember had imagined as their sanctuary. She shut the file and sat back, the recorder humming softly on the table. A mute witness to every secret whispered in the darkness. The house was too quiet. Ember realized she'd been holding her breath. She exhaled slowly and stared at the recorder, its tiny red light pulsing like a warning beacon. Ember's phone buzzed with a message from Marlowe. Can I come over? We need to talk. The timing was impossible. Ember's chest tightened with indignation. How could Marlowe so casually demand her presence, knowing what Ember now knew? And what would she say when confronted with the evidence Ember held in her digital hands? Ember rose, determined to face her betrayers head-on. She powered off the recorder, the click echoing in the stillness, then tucked it and the microSD card into her robe pocket. By the time Marlowe arrived, Ember had rehearsed her questions a dozen times in her mind. The doorbell chimed, and Ember opened the door to find Marlowe's anxious face framed by the hallway light. Ember motioned her inside, closing the door firmly behind her. Marlowe, Ember said, her voice unexpectedly steady. I know everything. Marlowe's breath caught, eyes flickering to Ember's robe pocket. Ember placed a gentle hand over the fabric. I listened, she continued, voice calm but cold. From 11 p.m. to 1 a.m.
You told him to fall back to sleep.
He told you he was sorry. He told her to meet on the deck. Marlowe's complexion drained, her lips parting with no words. Ember took a step forward, the recorder heavy in her pocket like a second heart.
Explain, Ember whispered.
Marlowe's shoulders sagged as tears welled in her eyes.
I'm sorry.
I never meant to hurt you. He said he was unhappy, he said he needed. Stop, Ember interrupted, voice rising but controlled. I don't want his excuses. I want the truth. Marlowe shook her head, tears spilling over. He said our business venture was at stake, that you were going to find out. Don't lie to me, Ember said. The recorder's weight was a reminder. She had the unfiltered truth, down to every inflection. All I asked for was the truth. Marlowe's gaze flicked to Ember's belly, then back to her eyes. Ember felt a pang of doubt. a glimmer of the old compassion she once felt for her friend. But betrayal cut deepest when it came from someone you loved. Outside, the wind stirred the pines, their needles whispering as though eavesdropping on Ember's moment of reckoning. Ember drew in a slow breath and held it, the hush of the night cloaking them both in tension. Finally, Marlowe spoke, voice raw with guilt. He promised it would end tonight. He said he'd fix us. But her voice broke, and Ember realized that behind Marlowe's betrayal lay a web of fear and desperation as tangled as her own shock. Ember pressed her hand to her belly once more, channeling her protectiveness into the steely resolve she needed now. "We're done," she said softly. "All of it." Marlowe's sob shook her frame, and Ember felt a last flicker of the friendship they once shared fade like morning mist. Ember opened her robe pocket and held out the recorder. "You'll want this," she said, voice unyielding. Marlowe took it with trembling fingers, her eyes fixed on the device that had turned Ember into a listener of stolen secrets. Ember stepped back and closed the distance between Marlowe and the door, her mind clear as the nighttime sky outside. As Marlowe left, the recorder in hand, Ember closed the door and leaned against it, exhaling a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. The recorder had revealed the truth, brutal and unvarnished, thrusting Ember's world into a new reality. Yet in that stark clarity, Ember found a strange liberation. She would no longer be blind to the shadows lurking in her home. From this moment on, Ember Sterling would rely only on her own eyes and ears, and on her own unshakable strength as she navigated the aftermath of betrayal and prepared to protect the life growing within her. The pines outside rustled in the night wind, their hush now a vow. In the darkness, truth would always find a way to be heard. Ember Sterling awoke the morning after her covert surveillance session feeling a strange tension in her chest, as though every nerve ending hummed with the weight of last night's revelations. The house was silent, save for the muted tick of the antique mantel clock and the faint hiss of steam from the coffee maker in the kitchen. Determined to confront the tangible proof she needed before facing Wilder, Ember rose from the plush love seat and walked through the sunlit hallway to the laundry room, where a fresh load of his blazers and shirts lay waiting. Her fingers trembled as she rifled through the neatly folded stack, each garment a symbol of her husband's professional life, and, she now knew, a repository for his deceit. Ember paused at a navy blazer she'd helped Wilder pick out for an important pitch last month, its fabric still carrying the faint scent of his cologne. She slid her hand beneath the blazer's lapel, tugging gently at the edge of his crisp white dress shirt. There it was, a smudge of deep, Merlot-red lipstick near the collar, almost perfectly round, as though someone had pressed her husband's fabric against lips they intended to commemorate in color. Ember's breath caught in her throat. She lifted the shirt to the light, inspecting the stain against the stark white cotton. Every immaculate crease and press fold suddenly felt like an insult.
"Careful now."
She unbuttoned the collar and examined the underside of the lapel, where she found a diagonal scratch, fine, crescent-shaped, as though someone had run their fingernail across the skin in a moment of passion. The fabric held a few loose fibers, as if caught in a frantic grip. Ember's heart pounded so loudly she was certain anyone nearby could hear it echoing through the quiet house. Her fingers hovered over the lipstick stain, as if she might brush it away, but she knew better. This was evidence, tangible and undeniable. She gently extracted a cotton ball from the nearby supply bin and dabbed at the stain, watching as the deep red pigment transferred onto the pad, leaving the circle intact. Ember gasped at her own rationality. She was preserving proof for the confrontation she knew must come. She laid the cotton ball on the counter next to the shirt and propped the collar under the overhead light, scrutinizing every detail. The scratch looked fresh, the fibers slightly frayed. She pressed her fingertips to them, feeling the telltale snag on her skin even without fabric between them. Ember straightened and lifted her head, blinking as tears pricked her eyes. The living room clock chimed 8 times, each toll a reminder that Wilder would return soon. She needed more context, entry times, excuses, and more proof if possible. But first, she had to process this moment of shattering betrayal. With determined calm, Ember moved to Wilder's study, where she knew his laptop and daily planner rested. She opened the planner to the current week and traced Wilder's handwritten entries. Mom's luncheon, 11 a.m. Draft proposal, 2 p.m. Video call, 4 p.m. Dinner with client, 7 p.m. There was no mention of dinner at home. Ember closed the planner and set it aside, turning back to the kitchen counter where the lipstick-stained cotton ball lay like a macabre token. Her mind raced. Marlowe's secret at the Velvet Heart, the midnight voices urging clandestine meetings, Carter Hayes' footage. All these pieces had led to this moment, this undeniable mark on the shirt. Ember needed to catalog everything. She snapped a photograph of the stain and scratch with her phone, the flash capturing the jagged outline of the lipstick ring and the fine white fibers standing on end around the scratch. Then she placed the shirt and cotton ball into a clear evidence bag, an old Ziploc pouch she repurposed from Wilder's spare camera accessories, sealing it with a precise click. Ember's breath came in shallow bursts as she confronted the weight of her findings. The shirt, once a simple instrument of her husband's daily routine, had transformed into irrefutable proof of infidelity. She clenched her jaw, feeling a fierce protectiveness for the life in her womb. The betrayal was not only against her trust, but against the future she and Wilder had promised their child. Footsteps on the porch alerted her to Wilder's impending arrival. Ember carefully folded the remaining clean shirts, returning them neatly to the laundry basket, and hung the stained shirt on a plastic hanger, lining it up with the other garments to conceal the evidence. Then she smoothed her hair, wiped away stray tears, and stepped into the hallway, every fiber of her being taut with resolve. The front door clicked open. Wilder's familiar silhouette filled the entryway before he stepped inside, shedding his blazer as he crossed to greet Ember. "Hey, love," he said, voice warm but weary. "Long day. How are you feeling?" He moved to pull her into an embrace, but Ember remained still, her arms folded across her chest. Wilder's brow furrowed. What's wrong? You look," his gaze flicked to the shirt on the hanger. Ember followed his line of sight. "That's the shirt you wore last night," she said quietly. Wilder's grip on the blazer faltered. He cleared his throat. "Yes, I thought I'd leave it to be cleaned in the morning." Ember stepped closer, eyes fixed on the collar. "That's not just last night's shirt, is it?" Her voice was steady but low. Wilder stiffened, his gentle warmth evaporating. He began. "Stop," Ember said, lifting her hand. "Before you explain, I need you to look at this." She reached into her robe pocket and withdrew the sealed bag containing the cotton ball and a small swatch of fabric from the collar. Wilder's eyes widened as she held it out. He swallowed hard.
Ember és chestnut.
"It's lipstick. And a scratch." She paused, letting the words settle between them like a confession. "Do you want to explain?" Silence stretched, thick and brittle. Wilder's face paled. Ember's voice wavered. "I deserve the truth," she whispered. Wilder ran a hand through his hair, gaze dropping to the floor. Ember swallowed past the lump in her throat and raised her eyes to meet his. The porch light filtered through the lace curtain, casting the scene in muted gold. Wilder forced a breath. "It's complicated," he began. His voice cracked. Ember felt her heart hollow as the man she loved stumbled over the words she'd rehearsed in her mind for days. The moment hung suspended, the space between confession and betrayal, between promises made and promises broken, until Ember's resolve hardened. She followed the evidence she had uncovered. Piece by piece, each mark on that shirt a testament to the fracturing of their bond. As Wilder's apology faltered into silence, Ember folded her arms and stepped back, her eyes steady, her heart determined. The future she had envisioned lay shattered at her feet, but her love for the child she carried gave her the courage to demand honesty, no matter the cost. In that moment, surrounded by the quiet witness of her own home, Ember Sterling knew she would protect her child first, and herself as well, before allowing her life to be steered by a man who had left his mark not just on cloth, but on her trust. The dawn light had only just begun to filter through the pines when Ember Sterling's world upended entirely. She awakened on the cool tile floor of her laundry room, cheeks damp with tears and the remnants of the night's anxiety clinging to her skin like dew. Her head throbbed, each pulse echoing Wilder's final, unsteady admission of betrayal. She tried to rise, but her legs buckled, and the room spun. A low groan escaped her lips before darkness claimed her again. Ember came to in a haze of antiseptic scent and muted voices. She registered pale walls, a high ceiling, and the soft rustle of cotton sheets against her skin. Confusion flared as she realized she was lying on a narrow cot in a clinical room, not her own bed. Then she saw him, Cashin Locke, standing by her side with a furrowed brow of concern and weary determination. Cashin was a recent arrival to Cascade Ridge, a 30-year-old adjunct law professor at Pacific Northwest University who had moved into the neighborhood only months earlier to research environmental legislation. He struck an imposing figure in tailored charcoal trousers and a cable-knit sweater, his dark hair tousled as though he'd run a hand through it in frustration. Ember had exchanged polite greetings with him at the weekly farmers market, where he'd offered a knowing nod as she maneuvered her stroller past heirloom tomato stands. She'd never expected that behind his reserved smile lay a steadfast protector.
Ember.
Cashin asked, voice low but urgent. He pressed a cool hand to her forehead. You're burning up. She blinked, trying to focus.
Wah.
Sure, he said, gently lowering her back against the pillows. You fainted. Neighbors found you collapsed in the laundry room. His calm steadied her racing heart. We brought you here for evaluation. Better than having you on the cold floor all morning. She remembered piecing together that day. The confrontation with Wilder. The stabbing pain of discovering the lipstick stain and scratch, her trembling legs carrying her through the front door, the ringing in her ears, and then nothing but blackness. Ember's eyes filled with fresh tears of mortification and gratitude. Cashin pulled up a wooden chair and sat beside her, rolling a damp cloth between his fingers. Easy there. Let me check your pulse. He placed 2 fingers against her wrist. Fast but steady. Your blood pressure's elevated, reasonable, given the circumstances. He offered her a gentle smile. You're safe. Ember forced a nod. Thank you for helping. Her voice was a rasp. He inclined his head. No one should be alone after a fall, especially not when they're pregnant. He gently brushed a lock of hair from her eyes. Ember noted the sincere concern etched into his features, the slight crease between his brows, the soft downward curve of his lips. As he wrapped the damp cloth around her forehead, Ember's mind raced. How much did he know? Had he seen the surveillance footage? Had she spoken to him before? She realized he must have been the man who guided her home, who had carried her into his car, who had gently told the neighbors to fetch help. Cashin, she whispered, catching his gaze. You saw me collapse? He nodded, voice gentle.
Yes.
I was gardening in my front yard, pruning the rosemary hedge, when I saw you stumble out the door. You looked pale as a ghost, clutching your bag, and then you just collapsed. He paused as a nurse entered with a clear plastic bag of ice chips and saline. They recommended we move you here for monitoring. Ember's chest tightened with guilt. I'm sorry to impose. It's no imposition, Cashin said firmly. Consider it part of being a good neighbor. Now, you need to take it easy. He reached into the bag and offered her the ice chips. Ember accepted them gratefully, the cool sweetness soothing her parched mouth. While she drank, Cashin retrieved her phone from the bedside table. You have several missed calls and texts from Marlowe and someone named Carter Hayes. He scrolled through the inbox. Ember winced as he held the phone for her to see. Cashin's eyes softened. I'm sorry you've been dragged into this. He tapped the voicemail icon. Would you like me to play them? Ember shook her head. Not yet. Her throat tightened as she recalled Wilder's voice, Marlowe's betrayal, Carter's footage. But she realized that hearing them again, unfiltered, might break her completely. She placed the phone beside her and closed her eyes. Cashin's presence was a steady anchor. He wheeled over a chart of medications and water intake logs intended to track Ember's hydration, standard prenatal care after a fainting episode. His professional calm contrasted sharply with the chaos Ember felt inside. "Rest now," Cashin said gently. "I'll stay until someone from your midwife's office arrives." Ember nodded, exhaustion warring with the adrenaline of betrayal. She let her eyes drift closed, and she felt herself sink into the cot's thin mattress as Cashin hovered, an unwavering sentinel at her side. An hour later, the door opened, and a midwife in a crisp navy uniform entered, flanked by an assistant. Cashin stood back graciously, introducing himself. Ember watched as they checked her vitals, monitored her baby's heart rate, and administered a mild for to stabilize her fluids. Once the checks were complete, the midwife nodded at Cashin and ushered Ember into a wheelchair. Cashin folded the blankets around her shoulders and guided the chair down the hallway, through the inn's lobby, and into the bright morning sun. Ember felt the crisp air strengthen her, chased away the lingering dizziness, and she realized that Cashin's calm competence had saved her from escalation of her injuries. They reached Ember's front porch, where neighbors had gathered anxiously. Mrs. Delgado with a basket of fresh scones, Mr. Carter with gentle apologies, and a few onlookers murmuring concern. Cashin turned to Ember, offering a reassuring smile. "I'll step inside and bring back your shawl. Take care of yourself today." Ember nodded, heart full of gratitude. "Thank you." Once she was seated on her love seat, wrapped in her shawl, Cashin returned with a to-go cup of chamomile tea and her shawl. He placed them both gently on the side table. Ember beckoned him closer. "Cashin," she began, voice still fragile. "I don't know how much you know, but I need someone I can trust." Cashin took the seat beside her, folding his hands in his lap. "You can trust me. Whatever you need, I'm here." Ember drew in a shaky breath. She told him everything she'd uncovered, the in footage, the midnight voices recorded on the hidden pen recorder, the lipstick stain, the scratch. Cashin listened without interruption, his face betraying surprise but no judgment. When Ember finished, tears glimmered in her eyes. Cashin exhaled slowly. "Ember, what you've done is courageous. You documented everything, you have clear evidence. Now you need to decide what comes next." "Next?" Ember echoed, uncertainty ringing in her voice. "I don't know if I can face him." Cashin leaned forward, his gaze steady and warm. "You don't have to face him alone. You have options. You could package this evidence and demand the truth. Or, if you choose, I can help you find legal counsel familiar with marital agreements, especially since you're both co-owners of Ridge Green Innovations. There are protections for you and your child." Ember's eyes widened. "You'd help me?" He offered a small, reassuring smile. "I'm an adjunct law professor. I've handled dispute resolutions and non-disclosure agreements before. While I can't officially represent you in court, university policy, I can guide you through the process of securing an attorney who specializes in family law. And I can be there for moral support." Ember let his words wash over her in a tide of relief. She had felt isolated, adrift in a sea of betrayal. Now, with Cashin's steady presence and practical expertise, she sensed a path forward. "Thank you," Ember whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Cashin offered his gloved hand. Ember placed hers in it, the warmth of his grip a quiet promise. "You'll figure this out," he said softly, "one step at a time." As the midwife's car pulled up to deliver medical records and follow-up instructions, Ember felt a flicker of hope ignite amid her heartbreak. She was not alone. The man she once believed to be her only safe harbor had proven unfaithful, but Cashin Locke, the unexpected neighbor with a kind heart and a legal mind, had risen to become her true protector. The sun climbed higher, casting golden beams through the living room windows. Ember sipped the tea Cashin had brought, its floral notes soothing her frayed nerves. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. Confrontations, legal hurdles, emotional reckonings. But for the first time since the betrayal, Ember felt empowered. She would reclaim her life, safeguard her child, and navigate the coming storm with Cashin by her side. And in the quiet of that morning, as the pines whispered outside and Ember traced the rim of her teacup, she resolved to embrace this new alliance. The storm of deceit had passed, and in its place stood a solid bridge of trust, built not on promises, but on unwavering action, compassionate support, and the promise of justice to come. The sun had barely climbed above the fir-covered hills of Cascade Ridge when Ember Sterling and her attorney, Vanessa Monroe, arrived at the Redwood County Courthouse. The building's facade of limestone pillars and tall, arched windows gleamed in the morning light, but Ember felt none of its promise. Her chest tightened as she saw lines of legal professionals already moving with purposeful intent. Clutching her briefcase like a lifeline, she followed Vanessa through the grand foyer, past the dark oak seating where a clerk directed her to the third-floor family division. Inside courtroom 3B, the mahogany benches were already half-filled with spectators, curious neighbors. A few local reporters from the Cascade Ridge Gazette and Carter Hayes, seated in the front row beneath the gallery, hands folded and face impassive. Ember offered him a small nod of gratitude. He returned it with a quiet, steady glance that bolstered her resolve. At precisely 9 a.m., Judge Marisol Delgado, herself a Cascade Ridge native and graduate of Pacific Northwest University, entered the chamber, her black robes flowing behind her as she settled onto the bench. Ember recognized the judge's reputation for fairness and firm command of procedure. If there was someone to ensure a just outcome, it would be Judge Delgado. "Good morning," the judge intoned, voice resonant. "We are here for the divorce hearing of Sterling versus Hayes. Counselor Monroe, you may proceed with your opening statement." Vanessa Monroe rose, adjusting her tailored navy suit, and addressed the court with composed clarity. "Your Honor, on behalf of Ms. Ember Sterling, we seek a decree of dissolution of marriage on grounds of irreconcilable differences compounded by infidelity. We will present evidence demonstrating Mr. Wilder Hayes's betrayal through recorded audio, video surveillance, physical evidence, and witness testimony. We ask the court to grant Ms. Sterling's sole custody of the minor child and to award appropriate spousal support and division of assets accordingly." Judge Delgado nodded. "Counselor Hayes, your response." Across the aisle, Wilder Hayes's counsel, Jonathan Pierce, a tall, silver-haired litigator from a Seattle firm, stood and offered his own measured opening. "Your Honor, while my client deeply regrets the breakdown of this marriage, he contests the severity of these allegations and seeks a fair resolution in accordance with state statute and equitable distribution." Vanessa returned to her seat, and the court clerk called the first witness, Carter Hayes. Ember's breath caught as Carter took the stand and was sworn in. Counsel Monroe approached. "Mr. Hayes, please state your relationship to the parties." "Carter Hayes, colleague of Mr. Hayes at Stratagem Green Tech," he answered. Ember saw him stiffen, then continue with calm precision. "I contacted Ms. Sterling after reviewing security footage from the Redwood Lane Inn on June 12, 2025, showing Mr. Hayes entering and staying with another woman." Vanessa clicked a remote, and a monitor beside the judge lit up with grainy infrared images, Wilder's tall silhouette adjusting his jacket collar, then leaning close to Marlo Vance. The judge and both attorneys watched as the footage played. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "Is that date accurate?" Vanessa asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Thank you." Vanessa stepped back. Pierce rose. "Mr. Hayes, did you ever share this footage with Miss Sterling?"
No, counselor.
Objection relevance. Judge Delgado tapped her gavel. Sustained. Carter stepped down, and Vanessa signaled the clerk for the next exhibit. Number 2, Ember's pen recorder transcript. Vanessa presented an excerpt of the audio recorded between 11:03 and 11:15 p.m., where Wilder's voice, hushed but tense, admitted coordinating with Marlo Vance to conceal his infidelity. The transcript scrolled line by line. "I've covered my tracks. She thinks I'm in San Francisco. Just 10 minutes, then we end this." Wilder Lee Hayes's face drained of color as the clerk played the audio through the courtroom speakers. Ember's heart pounded at the clarity of his betrayal. She met Wilder's eyes. They flickered with guilt. Counsel Pierce objected to the duration, but the judge allowed the key excerpt to remain. Next, Vanessa introduced Exhibit 3, a photograph of the lipstick-stained shirt collar and the cotton swab of lipstick. Ember watched as juror number 4 held the exhibit, then pinned it onto the easel. "Mr. Hayes, how do you explain this stain?" Vanessa asked. Pierce shot to his feet. "Objection. Chain of custody." Vanessa produced a notarized affidavit detailing how Ember retrieved the shirt, photographed it, and sealed it in an evidence bag. "Your Honor, the chain is intact." Judge Delgado granted admission, and Vanessa addressed the jury. Physical evidence corroborating the audio and video, immutable proof that Mr. Hayes engaged in an affair under the same roof Ms. Sterling believed to be her sanctuary. The third witness was Marlo Vance. Ember held her breath as Marlo took the stand, tears glistening. Marlo testified under cross-examination that she had entered the inn with Wilder on the night of June 12th and had conspired to conceal his presence from Ember because, Marlo admitted, she feared Ember would leave if she knew the truth. Her voice broke as she apologized in court. "I betrayed Ember's trust out of fear and selfishness." Throughout the testimony, Ember noticed Carter's unwavering support from the gallery, his clenched jaw softening. The courtroom's atmosphere crackled with tension as Vanessa gently guided Marlo through each admission, ensuring clarity for the jury. By midday, it was time for Ember to testify. She rose, placing one hand on the rail before the witness stand and fixing her gaze on the jury. Her voice, though soft, carried with steadfast resolve. "I never suspected Wilder of infidelity until I saw the footage Carter provided. I love him, and the thought of divorce shatters me, but I cannot remain in a marriage built on lies." She recounted her discovery of the lipstick stain, the scratch on his collar, and the midnight conversations she recorded. Ember's admission of fainting added emotional gravity to her testimony. She spoke of fear for herself and for the baby she carried. Judge Delgado paused the proceedings to allow a recess, during which jurors conferred and staff distributed water. Ember sipped cool water. Pierce conferred in hushed tones with Wilder. Their heads bowed. Ember felt a surge of gratitude for Vanessa Monroe's unwavering guidance and for Carter's unyielding presence. When the jury returned, closing arguments began. Vanessa spoke with measured passion. Ms. Sterling sought love, fidelity, and honesty. Instead, she uncovered betrayal, evidence beyond dispute. "We ask the jury to grant her this divorce swiftly, so she may begin healing." Pierce rose, adjusting his glasses. "Ladies and gentlemen, mistakes were made, but this is not a cause to dismantle a family. We ask you to weigh the totality of the marriage and consider reconciliation before final judgment." Ember watched as the jury exchanged glances, some grim, others contemplative. The judge's final instructions were clear, deliberate based on evidence. Reach a verdict of legal dissolution, yes or no. Determine matters of custody, support, and asset division. The clerk dismissed them to deliberate. Ember and Carter stepped outside to the hallway. Carter offered a reassuring nod. Ember closed her eyes, breathing deeply. "Thank you," she whispered. 90 minutes passed. Ember was called back into the gallery, the jurors filing in. Their foreperson stood. Ember's heart hammered as the clerk announced, "We, the jury, unanimously find in favor of the plaintiff, Ms. Ember Sterling, for dissolution of marriage." Relief and sorrow washed over Ember in equal measure. Judge Delgado entered the decree: sole legal and physical custody of the child to Ember, equitable division of assets, spousal support awarded for 2 years, and costs borne by Mr. Hayes. Wilder's face registered a flicker of shame as Marian Delacroix, the bailiff, handed the papers to Ember. Carter's gentle squeeze of her hand at her side grounded her. As Ember descended the courthouse steps, camera flashes snapped from local reporters capturing her composed yet weary expression. Carter walked beside her, offering a protective presence. Ember inhaled deeply, the crisp Cascade Ridge air filling her lungs. Behind her lay the courtroom where her truth had emerged. Ahead lay a future reclaimed. In that moment, surrounded by the solemn grandeur of the courthouse and buoyed by unwavering allies. Ember Sterling embraced the hard-won freedom that followed a dramatic day in court and the promise of a new chapter, honest and unburdened, for herself and her child. The late afternoon sun slanted through Ember Sterling's living room windows as she returned home, bruised but triumphant, from the courthouse steps. The crisp Cascade Ridge air that had felt invigorating only hours before now weighed heavy in her lungs, a reminder that every victory carried its own burdens. She moved slowly, each step measured, the adrenaline of the day ebbing into a pulsing ache in her legs and lower back. Cashin had insisted on accompanying her home, despite Ember's protests. "You need to rest," he said, his dark eyes unusually soft beneath the concern lines at his temples. He helped her carry her briefcase and a small stack of sealed court documents through the front door, laying them carefully on the coffee table. Ember managed a grateful smile, settling onto the love seat as Cashin retrieved her cold compress wrap and a cup of chamomile tea. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence. Ember sipped the tea, feeling its gentle warmth soothe her nerves. Cashin filled a shallow dish with ice cubes and wrapped them in a soft towel, pressing it to Ember's abdomen as she exhaled. The fleeting calm was a gift she rarely allowed herself. "Just rest," Cashin murmured. He reached for her hand, thumb gently circling over her knuckles. Ember nodded, closing her eyes, focusing on the soft humming of the wind through the pines outside. Ember's slumber was fragile, punctuated by dreams of courtroom benches dissolving into swirling forests of evergreen. When she stirred, it was to the sharp hiss of her phone alarm, a reminder of a prenatal checkup scheduled for later that afternoon. She blinked against the soft glow of late afternoon and tried to rise, but a twinge of dizziness pinned her back to the cushions. Cashin, seated nearby with a law text open across his lap, noticed her movement. "Take your time," he said, closing the book and setting it aside. "I can drive you." Ember forced a breath. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. She stood unsteadily, brushing back a few strands of hair that had escaped her bun. Cashin rose. "You really should let me," he insisted, his tone gentle but firm. Ember relented with a nod. "Okay." They reached the driveway, where Cashin's silver sedan sat ready. Ember slid into the passenger seat, her nerves jolting as she buckled the seatbelt over her rounded belly. Cashin parked in the shade of a cedar tree, the shadows dancing across the dashboard. He checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, eyes pale, cheeks flushed, and reached across to squeeze her hand. "You're going to be okay," he promised. The prenatal clinic lay a few miles beyond the ridge, a modern building of glass and sandstone with cherry trees framing the entrance. Cashin guided Ember to the wheelchair that awaited her and settled her in before rolling through the automatic doors. Ember's pulse fluttered in her ears as the nurse greeted them warmly and directed them to exam room 4. Inside, soft pastel walls and plush pillows created a sanctuary of calm. The midwife, Anya Patel, greeted Ember with a gentle smile and glanced at her chart. "How are you feeling since this morning?" she asked, her tone professional yet caring. "Better," Ember said, offering a small smile. She winced as she shifted to the exam table, a dull ache radiating from her lower abdomen. Anya set down the chart and pressed a stethoscope to Ember's back. "Your blood pressure stabilized," she observed, then asked Cashin to record Ember's weight and vital signs. Afterward, Anya applied the gel for the sonogram wand and guided Ember to shift onto her side. Ember forced herself to relax as the gel's cool slip eased over her skin. She watched the black and white screen as the technician navigated the wand gently across her belly. The image pulsed to life, fluid black punctuated by the bright flicker of a tiny heart. Ember's breath caught in her throat, her hand fluttering to the screen. The baby's heartbeat was strong, rhythmic, a lifeline more vital than any court ruling. "Looks good," Anya said softly, her own relief evident. "Heart rate is within the 140 to 150 range." She switched to a frontal view, adjusting the angle to measure the amniotic fluid. "Fluid level is stable."
Ember exhaled.
tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. Anya cleaned the gel away and helped Ember sit up. "You did great. Just be mindful of any dizziness or sharp pains, especially given yesterday's events. Lean back if you feel faint and call if anything changes."
Ember nodded.
Cashin slid the wheelchair toward the exit and opened the door for her, the late afternoon sun striking a halo around her head. She squeezed Cashin's hand as they made their way back to the car, gratitude and fear swirling in her chest. That evening, Ember tried to rest, but the adrenaline of the day kept her restless. She hovered near the window, watching the sky shift from rose to indigo. Cashin was preparing dinner in the kitchen, simple broth, soft bread, sentimentality born from the desire to nurture her strength. Ember sat at the table, cradling a mug of herbal tea. Her phone chimed, a message from Marlo Vance, apologizing again and requesting a chance to explain. Another from Carter Hayes, offering his ongoing support. Ember's chest tightened at the reminders of betrayal, but she refused to let her grief overshadow the precious victory of her baby's safety. She took a small, determinate sip of her tea. Then she heard the soft jingle of the front gate latch, unexpected at this hour. She rose to investigate, finding Marlo on the porch, raincoat soaked from a sudden drizzle. Ember hesitated but stepped aside, letting Marlo in. "Ember," Marlo began, hooded eyes earnest. Ember raised a hand. "Please, not now." Marlo's shame made her shoulders slump. "I just wanted you to know I'm so sorry." Ember nodded, compassion and caution warring in her chest. "Thank you," she said. "But I need to rest." Marlov lingered a moment longer, then left. Ember closed the door, her heart pounding in the lingering tension. She couldn't rest, not yet. Intent on calming her nerves, Ember retreated to the living room and sank into the love seat. Cashin emerged with a bowl of the warm broth and sat beside her. Ember accepted the bowl and blew on a spoonful before sipping. The savory warmth soothed her throat, but the ache in her limbs persisted. She took a few more spoonfuls, then set the bowl aside. As she rose to head upstairs, her vision blurred, sudden vertigo. A wave of dizziness that stole her breath. Her legs buckled, and she reached out to steady herself on the coffee table, but her fingers missed the edge. Ember stumbled forward, pain exploding through her abdomen as she fell toward the hardwood floor. Cashin's shout cut through the haze. "Ember!" She cried out as she hit the floor, the world tilting. A wave of nausea washed through her as tears streamed down her face. "Cashin!" she gasped, vision swimming. Cashin was there in an instant, arms beneath her back and knees, lifting her gently. "I've got you," he murmured, voice taut with alarm. He carried her toward the couch, keeping her body level. Ember's stomach quivered with pain so fierce she couldn't breathe around it. "Your water broke?" she managed to whisper, heart thundering. Cashin's face was pale. "No," he said, pressing a hand to her side. "Stay with me. I'm calling an ambulance." Ember doubled over, sobs rattling her frame. "It hurts." "I know," Cashin said, dialing with his other hand. "Hang in there." The hours that followed were a blur of diagnostics. Ultrasounds to assess fetal well-being, blood tests to check for internal bleeding, antihypertensive medications dripped slowly into Ember's veins. Cashin refused to leave her side, reading case law on his tablet and offering quiet commentary to keep her mind occupied. Ember clung to his presence, the steady rhythm of his hand against hers the only constant amid the clinical flurry. As twilight fell beyond the hospital windows, Dr. Choi returned with news. She smiled softly at Ember and Cashin. "Your baby is doing beautifully. No signs of placental detachment. You have to stay here overnight for observation, but the crisis has passed." Tears of relief streamed down Ember's face. She faced Cashin, voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you for saving us." He brushed a fingertip across her brow. "No one else could," he whispered. Ember nestled into the sterile sheets, the soft hum of the monitors lulling her toward rest. The fear and pain of the accident still echoed in her mind. but the joy of knowing her child was safe swelled in her heart. Cashin arranged the blankets around her, ensuring the 4 lines were untangled. "Sleep now," he said gently, stepping toward the door. "I'll be in the waiting room, but I'll check on you soon." Ember reached out, gripping his hand. "Stay," she pleaded. Cashin paused, then took the empty chair beside her bed. He held her hand through the night, a silent sentinel as she drifted into a cautious, restorative sleep. Outside, the pines whispered in the breeze, their needles shimmering under the hospital's security lights. In the sanctuary of that hospital room, Ember Sterling, once defined by betrayal and upheaval, found solace in the unwavering presence of her unexpected protector. Though the road ahead remained fraught with challenges, their shared ordeal had forged an unbreakable bond, one built on courage, compassion, and the promise of new life. Ember Sterling awoke to the gentle hum of morning traffic outside her hospital room window, the soft glow of dawn filtering through the pale curtains. The rhythmic beeping of the fetal monitor beside her bed felt like a heartbeat she could finally trust. She blinked against the sterile light and turned her head to see Cashin Locke seated in the visitor's chair, laptop closed and leaning against his leg, eyes warm with relief at her waking. Her gaze caught the display of the monitor, steady at 148 BPM, and a wave of gratitude and wonder rose in her chest. After the harrowing collapse and emergency transfer, she had feared for the life of her child and her own well-being. But here she was, lying in a bed where each breath felt like a small, victorious step toward healing. Cashin offered her a reassuring smile. "How are you feeling?" he asked, voice soft as he placed a hand over hers. Ember's throat tightened with emotion. She squeezed his fingers. "Better," she whispered. "Stronger." The midwife, Anya Patel, entered quietly to take Ember's vitals, praising the improvement in her blood pressure and the baby's growth on the ultrasound. Within an hour, Dr. Helena Choi, the perinatologist, arrived with encouraging news. Ember's fall had not caused any placental damage, and the risk of preterm labor had passed. The doctors agreed she could be discharged the next day, provided she rested and maintained strict hydration. Released from the hospital, Ember returned to her Cascade Ridge home, a sanctuary that once felt fractured by betrayal, now imbued with promise. The living room, bathed in gold afternoon light, looked like a new place to her. The velvet love seat where Wilder's secrets had been uncovered now served as the throne of her resilience. Cashin insisted on helping her settle back in, arranging fresh flowers of white lilies and blue hydrangeas on the coffee table, their petals a silent celebration of life. Ember sat on the love seat, propped by soft pillows, and felt the gentle comfort of home, no longer a stage for deception, but a cradle for her rebirth. Over the next week, Cashin's presence became a constant source of stability. He brought healthy meals, quinoa bowls bright with roasted vegetables and grilled salmon, and brewed herbal tea blends to soothe her nerves. He researched pediatricians, scheduled follow-up appointments, and sat through every consultation as Ember navigated prenatal care with renewed mindfulness. Each ultrasound appointment, each check-in call with Dr. Choi, Cashin waited patiently in the lobby, offering warm smiles and encouraging words. Ember found herself leaning into his unwavering support, marveling at how effortlessly he anticipated her needs without her asking. Meanwhile, word of Ember's court victory and subsequent hospitalization began circulating through Cascade Ridge. Neighbors offered meals, flowers, and heartfelt notes. Mrs. Delgado, the kindly librarian, delivered freshly baked oatmeal cookies. Mr. Carter from down the street brought a handmade wooden mobile for Ember's nursery, with miniature carved birds on swinging branches. Even Marlo Vance sent a bouquet of white peonies, an olive branch, as Ember tried to process a complicated mixture of forgiveness and caution. Through it all, Cashin remained her anchor, tending to her spirit as carefully as her body. As Ember regained her strength, she and Cashin began discussing the future. One evening, wrapped in soft blankets on the porch, they watched the sun set behind the pine-studded hills. Ember rested her head on Cashin's shoulder and drew patterns in the lace trim of his sweater. I never imagined finding myself here, she said quietly, voice reflecting both sorrow and hope. Cashin wrapped an arm around her. Life has a way of surprising you, he replied. But you're not alone. I'm here, for you and the baby. Ember closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of cedar and chamomile on the breeze, and allowed herself to believe in the possibility of joy. When Ember's doctor finally cleared her for gentle activity, she insisted on attending the annual Everwood Bloom Festival, an event Cashin had told her about during her first weeks in Cascade Ridge. Set in the rolling fields behind Everwood Gardens, the festival showcased thousands of blooming wildflowers and peonies, local artisans selling handcrafted wreaths, and a marketplace of preserves and soaps scented with lavender and rosemary. More than just a celebration of spring, it had grown into a beloved community gathering where families picnicked amid sea-level blooms and local musicians serenaded passers-by with acoustic melodies. On a crisp Saturday morning, Ember and Cashin strolled onto the festival grounds, where rows of flower beds glowed in hues of blue, pink, yellow, and white. Ember's hand rested on her belly, feeling a satisfying flutter as the baby responded to the warmth of the sun. They paused at a stall where an elderly beekeeper displayed honeycomb samples, the sweet aroma of clover honey mingling with a perfumed air. Ember tasted a dab on her fingertip and smiled as its golden sweetness melted on her tongue. Cashin bought 2 small jars, one labeled Summer Blossom and the other Wildflower Reserve, promising Ember they would host a celebratory brunch when the baby arrived. They wandered on, admiring wreaths of rose petals and ribbons at an artisan's booth, crossing paths with neighbors who greeted them with cheers. Ember waved to Carter Hayes, who stood at the edge of the field photographing the blooms for the Gazette's upcoming Sunday feature. He nodded and offered her a thumbs up, a silent salute to her journey from courtroom to recovery to this bright field of blossoms. Ember felt a swelling pride. Her story had transformed from tragedy to triumph, woven into the tapestry of her resilient community. At the festival's heart stood a historic gazebo draped in garlands of white peonies, its stage set for the afternoon's keynote by local poet Lorelei Pike. Ember and Cashin found a bench beneath its shade, settling in as children chased butterflies around the lawn. As Lorelei's melodic voice rose in verse, incantations of new life, growth after winter's slumber, Ember felt tears of gratitude in her eyes. Every line spoke to her experience of emerging from darkness into light, of finding love where she least expected it, of trusting her own strength to carry her forward. When the reading concluded, Ember rose to stretch her legs. Cashin offered his arm, and together they wandered to the perimeter of the scarcely crowded dance floor, where a local bluegrass band had begun to tune their instruments. The first notes of fiddle and banjo coaxed Ember into a gentle sway. Cashin placed his hands lightly on her waist, guiding her through a soft two-step that felt at once like a dream and the most natural thing in the world. Ember's abdomen pressed against him, the baby's tiny kicks keeping time with the music. "Look at you," Cashin murmured, voice laced with wonder. "You're radiant." Ember tilted her head, curiosity lighting her gaze. Cashin reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a small leather box. Ember's heart stuttered as he opened it to reveal a ring, an intricately wrought silver band set with a single pale blue topaz in the shape of a teardrop. Its facets caught the sunlight, scattering prismatic light across Cashin's hopeful expression. Ember gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Ember Sterling," Cashin began, voice steady though his eyes glistened. "You have shown me the true meaning of courage and grace in the face of adversity. You carried a child through heartbreak and danger and emerged with a strength I've only read about in legends. I want to build our future together, to walk beside you as partner and protector, to love you and our child for all our days. Will you marry me?" Ember's breath caught, her tears blurring the band's reflection. Around them, festival-goers paused to watch, children forming a loose circle as neighbors sensed the moment's magic. Ember touched the topaz, its cool surface grounding her. She thought of every step that had led her here, the moment she uncovered Betrayal, the night she fought to save her baby. The days spent rebuilding her life with Cassion's steadfast support. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking with joy. Yes, 1,000 times yes. Cassion slipped the ring onto her finger, and Ember slipped her arms around his neck. They pressed their foreheads together, laughter and tears mingling in the golden afternoon. The bluegrass band shifted into a celebratory tune, and couples swayed around them, confetti petal cannons bursting overhead in a rain of flower petals. Ember lifted her face to catch a falling blossom on her tongue, savoring its soft sweetness as Cassion held her close. As the petals drifted down, Ember closed her eyes and made a silent vow to cherish every sunrise with Cassion, to guide their child with love untainted by betrayal, to honor the community that nurtured her when she needed it most. The past, its scandals, betrayals, and near tragedies, had shaped her, but they would not define her. Later, as the festival wound down and the sky glowed with dusk's lavender hues, Ember and Cassion walked hand in hand through the bloomlit paths, neighbors calling congratulations from across the lawn. At the festival gate, they paused one last time beneath an arch of climbing jasmine, its fragrance heady in the cooling air. Ember leaned against Cassion's shoulder, resting her head as he placed a gentle kiss on her temple. "I love you," he murmured. "I love you too," Ember replied, her voice as steady as her heartbeat. Beneath the jasmine and the whispering pines, Ember Sterling and Cassion Locke stepped into their shared future, a life reborn from adversity, bound by love, trust, and the promise of new beginnings. And that brings us to the end of today's story on Truistory Vibes. Don't forget to leave a comment with a quote or moment that touched you the most. Your words give our team the motivation to keep creating more heartfelt stories. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.